Hey, everybody. In today's episode, we have Red Sun Radio. Red Sun Radio is a New York based rock group that formed 4 years ago as a staple Fordham University rock band. Red Sun Radio honed their sound from the basement of a Pugsley's Pizza near the campus. They have a velvet underground feel to their music, but they love to experiment with all things rock and beyond. In this conversation, we go through what it's like to be a modern rock band. We go into how they formed, how they evolved as performers, their process, and how they make music. Throughout, we also go over all things music, from the New York music scene to the Mercury Lounge, and all things rock, from Blink-182 to The Strokes to Phoebe Bridgers to King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard to Radiohead, the impact of social media on artistry, and so much more. Without further ado, here's Red Sun Radio.
Sure. I'm Sean O'Connor.
I'm Ken Eiselhart.
I'm Teddy Sideropoulos.
And we are Red Sun Radio.
Yeah.
I sing.
Oh,
He's
guitar.
guitar. Well, he also sings now on some new
sings it.
stuff.
Yeah.
And
Play the drums too.
Teddy doesn't sing yet.
We'll
see if we can change that.
absolutely not.
So how would you guys describe, Red Sun Radio and your sound?
everything under the umbrella of rock, I guess. I don't know, just all the decades. Everything that Brett shares is everything that we listen to.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know what you call that nowadays. Maybe the 2020 decade is gonna have its own term of rock and roll, but that's what it is, I guess. I don't have a name for it other than rock.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I feel that.
We had one writer kind of described it in a good way, because we came from like a college radio station. That's kind of where we met. And he described our first album. He was like, it's anything that you might hear on a college radio station. Like you could see that these guys were there. So we never really have like one specific genre that we were sticking into aside from this like indie alt rock kind of thing.
Right. I've seen that in your music, you kind of have like this, you have like two folds where you have like this like softer indie acoustic sound, like your most recent song. But then you also have like that more like electric side, that's more like the garage rock oriented. Like to me, it sounds kind of like Velvet Underground-y type of stuff. And I was just kind of wondering like who's responsible for what, I guess. Like where do you guys all have like this very similar sound as like a collaborative effort, or individually do you each bring kind of a different taste?
These two guys kind of. Right.
Well, no, I mean you bring the rock drums.
Yeah, but
I feel like I don't know. We all listen to so much different stuff. I know sometimes we argue with our other guitarist Noof, who's still quarantining in Massachusetts. He's wasn't ready to move out yet, but he's always like, we gotta pick a sound. But I'm just like, dude, we listen to so much music. Let's just make what we want to make, as long as it sounds good and it rocks.
Yeah, I feel like that. Like that being said, there are a lot of songs. Like there are certain songs. I mean, obviously that I recognize as mine, and certain that I recognize as yours. Like even though I think the sound gels together, there are songs, like there are Ken songs and there are Sean songs, and you can kind of hear like the little things that we do differently.
I mean, I suppose so.
Mm-hmm.
You guys singular songwriters, or is it kind of like a Sean Ken partnership on the songwriting, or do you each write individually?
Depends on the song, really.
Mm-hmm.
And like it depends on the album, because like that first album was songs that we've been working on since college, so that was like very collaborative, and there were still songs we brought separately. But I feel like the way we write a lot of the time is like we'll have a song that we bring and then bring it to the whole band and flesh it out. And Yeah, no, but it's definitely like a collaborative thing. Like I said, like if it wasn't for like Teddy on the drums, I mean, he brings not only so much like a rock thing, but like these like more like jazzy kind of rhythms, like stuff that I would never think to put in a song.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you.
So when did the band start? How did you guys all meet each other, and how'd you end up forming a band?
We all went to Fordham University in the Bronx. I met Ken, 2 past members, and our other guitarist who's in Massachusetts. I met them online at a bar. They needed a singer. I joined. At some point, a drummer left. Teddy also went to Fordham. He joined.
I think Sean's credentials going into the band were that he was in a Blink-182 cover band in high school.
Oh, God.
And we're like, we'll take it.
I still like him. I mean, I don't know.
And we're always going to disagree on that, but it's okay.
You gotta love Blink. They're one of the classics, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'll say.
Do you?
I called Travis Barker's drumstick back in high school at their last New Jersey show, I think, or like tri-state area show. So,
How do you
that's
feel
a-
about them post DeLonge? Are they still? Do they still?
I
hold?
mean, I don't really listen to him now. I gotta be honest.
I like the UFO guy. That's Mark Hoppus.
That's the one.
No,
that's
that's
the
the
one.
Oh man, I can do that.
So you can't speak that.
I like his work with extraterrestrials. That's interesting stuff.
It
He
is.
talks to the government about that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard he was responsible for the mirror that's popping up all over the world. You know, it's like- yeah, I
I
heard
thought of him when I saw that.
He definitely knows something about it. Something that the general public doesn't know.
Yeah. Know something.
So what was the sound coming out of Fordham at the time? Like, were you guys always just had the goal of just rocking in whatever way that it sounded, or was there like a specific sound of the area that was reigning at the time that sort of drew you guys together?
There were a couple different things. There was we had a coffee house on campus that had a very kind of like lo-fi, like pavement kind of sound. Like not very much what we were doing. Like we were doing a way more like alternative, like we had our parts, we wanted to sound good and like tight. And like what they were doing was a very kind of like loose, kind of sound. And then the alternative thing was there was this really cool venue there called the Meat Locker?
Or the meat shop.
The Meat Shop. Yeah,
Meat Lockers.
this guy had like this venue, and he would host these like crazy like punk bands or like rap groups. I remember one of the big ones that I remember was Diet Sig. Like they kind of blew up after the fact. And that was like a very like kind of like punk, like more hardcore sound. That being said, we didn't really fit into either of those categories. So yeah, I wouldn't even say we were really influenced by it. The scene there wasn't huge. Like it wasn't that big.
When did you guys graduate from Fordham?
2018.
In 2019. I'm also technically 2019.
That's right.
I don't.
So when did you start like your live, like music circuit? Like trying to get gigs and stuff like that, and like really trying to get into it.
Yeah, it was like 2016, 2017. I think like one of the first real like New York City things we had was pianos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of these, I guess, New York venues where you're just like behind the door, you got to pay extra money to get in to see the band. To be totally honest, I didn't really like it that much. The way it was set up. I'm very curious to see what's gonna happen coming out of this pandemic. But playing some of those shows was just like annoying. It's like, I don't know. You would expect to maybe just go into a bar and see a band playing, but it's like a separate closed off room and so many people aren't interested. And I'm just thinking, why aren't we just in the bar? Open it up, blow it up,
That's
and let's
interesting.
just play to
Yeah.
the people. So maybe something will change. Some sort of good will come out of everything shutting down and reworking. I don't know. That's
I think it
kind
definitely
of
will, though. I think that's interesting. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it'll kind of have like a little bit of like a reset button, and things will be able to like whatever the system was will have to be adjusted in some way.
Yeah. So we were doing that, and then we were playing a lot of like backyard like parties and that kind of stuff. And that was cool because all you had to do to get people was like have a keg, and they didn't even have to give a shit about the music. But if you had a keg, you know, they would come. But those would always get shut down. Like one of the successful ones we played, it was actually a fundraiser, but I think the girls who threw it actually had to go to court because for like noise complaints.
Oh shit.
So like all the money we raised went to their court fees.
Not all of it. I mean, some of it went to Puerto Rico after that. I mean,
I think like $100 was left.
dude, I'd love to think more money went to the cause.
I don't know. I'd have to follow up.
You guys have anywhere in New York that you've liked to play a lot? You know, like any venues or anything?
Mercury Lounge we played that one time was fucking awesome. Remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah. They
About the Mercury Lounge, yeah.
Yeah,
they were doing it right.
that's a
I
dope
think.
spot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like one of those old spots too, where
Mhm.
we look up to because you hear stories about the Strokes coming out from the green room that like we were in, you know?
Yeah, that's all I think about too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just got done reading the book Meet Me in the Bathroom. So and they talk about the Mercury Lounge all the time.
Oh my God, it's a good book.
Yeah, right.
I read that
saw
twice
cousins
now.
play there too. It's a great venue, yeah.
They talk about them coming through. I remember like going through the crowds and like literally like holding their instruments up like rock stars.
Yeah, it's really great.
And it's Mercury Lounge, you know, it's a tiny.
And I remember that feeling, you know, like when you walk into the bar and then you go into like the main room and I'm just imagining like being like behind all the Strokes, just like
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Has it changed the way like that you write music and that you plan on sort of recording music now that you haven't been able to perform though? Because, you know, part of it is like what this style of music that you guys play is so good like live, and I bet like it seems like you guys were really soaking in like the energy, you know, of the places that you were performing in. Like, has it changed the way that you guys have like written your songs, or have you found you guys found yourselves writing different songs because of that, or is it more just you know, kind of sticking to what you think sounds good and going from there?
it's 100% has changed the way we write. Like the last single we released, "I Want to Get High," I remember that was written, you know, and that's not one of those high energy rockers. That's just like acoustic guitar and synth. That was literally whoever just could come to the studio. So like a lot of these like more soft ones, you kind of have to end up writing because that's all we could do at the time.
Yeah, no, I'll say that the last album, I was very adamant about making a record that sounded live, and I was just so used to like hearing overproduced music, and not that all of it's even bad. I just wanted to make a record that was a band playing in a studio, and all those songs were songs that we took together, and we actually had, I guess before this pandemic, we did it again. We made another very live, a bit more on the rock side of things record that we're aiming to put out in the summer, hopefully. Maybe it'll make more sense if the world opens up again, but I'm huge into that idea of a band playing together and bringing that energy, but it's changed now. We have these new songs. We're not sure what to do with them. And maybe it'll be on a third album or something, and we're just working on it now.
Yeah.
So hard to tell.
But you're so right. There's like the album that we haven't released a lot of these songs yet, but they were written with the intention of playing them live. Like we used to cover "I Got Mine" by the Black Keys, and it was like huge. Like people would always love that, and then so we had a bunch of songs that are kind of like that, and just literally inspired by that feeling of getting up and playing like this massive guitar lick and just, you know, hearing the drums to that and getting people moving. So we have a bunch of songs like that we're just sitting on now because it just doesn't feel like the right time to put them out.
Yeah. No, I find it so interesting because it feels like the traditional way of getting like bands big or like growing as a band is just like performing, right? Is performing, feeling it out, gaining your audience that way. And that's still obviously a huge way that people, you know, generate fans for their band or get notoriety and get people to pay attention to their good music. But it seems like now there's this whole other segment that you either can bypass live entirely or start creating music for channels, and or you have to create like different personas now to engage with audiences digitally, in addition to your what used to be just live presence. So I always find it really fascinating to see how people have been navigating it, and I think it does have a lot to do with just how you like what inspires you to make music too, and how you write the music, because it is clear that you guys are able to write very versatile style songs, and that shows maybe more in terms of you guys being able to just perform very off the cuff based on how you're feeling where you are. And I think that that's how you make very authentic good music too. It's very interesting. So are you engaging with your audience in any ways through COVID, in the absence of live? Is there something that you do now to try to keep up that feeling that your audience was getting from your music, other than just launching it classically through like Spotify and other things?
I
Social
don't.
media.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit of just social media posting, because just kind of being ourselves. I mean, I'm not even a huge fan of social media. Sometimes it drives me crazy. I work another job that's in social media, but
Well,
with all this time, we're just like, why don't we build a persona, like you're saying, on these socials and see if it connects with people, and then we'll just be in the studio. And we haven't done any live streams, but just working on songs, I guess.
and the persona thing is kind of strange too, because social media is like very personal. It's almost like you get to see behind the scenes. And as a band and as an artist, you wonder like how much do you want people to see that? Because like on stage, you're building up the persona of like being a rock star, and that's a very constructed kind of thing. And then you give them social media where it's like you get to see us just like in our pajamas writing these songs, and you kind of see how like not glamorous it is, or like just that we're just like a couple nerdy guys writing songs. So it's like
Speak for yourself, guy.
no, but it's like how much behind the scenes do you want to give away?
Yeah, I don't know if like being a rock star is a thing anymore. Now that social media is here, it's just like you're just gonna be yourself and show that you're just like a human being. There's not like a disconnect between the people that are making this music and getting on the stage and the people that listen to it. It's more just I'm just a guy, or we're just a couple of guys, and here's some music we make.
Yeah, but it is cool seeing like, I think COVID has forced us to reach out through social media in ways that we wouldn't have had we been busy like booking shows and that kind of thing. And that's partly why we connected with Brett. I forget exactly what happened, but I think we sent you Suicide Watch or whatever rooftop session.
Yeah, it's a rooftop thing. Yeah.
And you liked it, and then there we go. We get feedback from like you and people we would have never had met otherwise.
Well, I only started my thing actually during COVID, probably for like, more or less a similar type of reason. But I was just wondering, I have been thinking that also about artists and on social media, and how it's kind of changed the mystique of being, an artist and stuff like that. Do you think that that has impacted it, like made it worse, or, made it kind of better to be an artist in a way?
Well, it's some artists are handling it really well. Like if you think of like Phoebe Bridgers has like the biggest album of her career, and then can't tour it, but she has these really unique appearances on like late night things where it's not a live performance, it's very much recorded. But it'll also be her, like I saw her most recent one, and it starts out her in her bed, like a very intimate kind of COVID setting, and then she appears and all of a sudden she's in this grand auditorium, and then all of a sudden it's stripped away and it's like a green screen. So like,
like she's an icon already. I feel like
She became an icon in quarantine, which is kind of crazy. I've been following Phoebe for like probably about 2 years now, and like she was fairly like unheard of prior to COVID, I feel like.
Yeah, well, then
she's an indie artist.
I mean, that's gotta suck to have this huge album that you would actually see like how many new fans she got and how big she became.
Yeah,
but she's like, that's a good example of embracing it and using it for a positive thing. I think for bands like us, it's could be hard. Like it could destroy a band. I'm sure a lot of bands did end because like the money dried up, there was nowhere to tour, and like you have to wait out the storm. Luckily, we're still like able to do what we want to do. So that's why we were in a good position where we could still make the music we wanted to make, and just kind of wait this out and come back hopefully stronger when everything returns.
Hell yeah. So I'd love to go into maybe some of the songs from your last album, but I think the easiest way to do it is just to ask you straight up. Do you all, maybe you can each give a different answer or something too. Do you have a favorite song of yours and why?
How I Met Your Mother.
Oh yeah.
So that's a good one. I think is good.
So that one, that's one of my favorites. I would say that's my favorite off of that album, actually. My second favorite is I Hate the Ending.
That's like shoegazy
Yeah.
and heavy. It's a low-key sleeper.
It's just, it became my favorite over time, or one of my favorites over time.
I feel like for me, for all the wrong reasons, just because I got to feel like I was a badass in some story I'm telling. I don't know. But I don't know. It was like the epitome of live rock music to me, and I was so excited to write another record like that, which we actually wrote and we recorded. And then the world shut down. And I was like, wait a minute, this is irrelevant now.
You did. You know what bands have those songs on the previous album, and you're like, okay, I could see how they went from this album to that one.
Mhm.
For all the wrong reasons, the first one off the opening of the first album is definitely that. That's like a lot of what we recorded after that, because it was like so much fun to play and people were enjoying it. So we were like, let's do that.
Kind of bluesy, kind of hard.
Yeah.
Fun.
Can I spin the question and ask what your favorite would be?
I was about to say, I'm a big fan of Blue Christmas, actually.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was on that, bro.
I really like Blue Christmas. And I also really like I Want to Get High. I know that I commented, it reminds me of Skyway by The Replacements. I think it's just because there's some line about a subway and that has reminded me of, and it being acoustic. But yeah, I really love both of those songs. And I really like your soft side as well as, your bluesy side, like For All the Wrong Reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, the first song I heard from you guys was actually I Want to Get High, just because it was the most recent one that you had put out. So I started there. And it was so interesting for me to start with that and then to go back into your album. Because it was kind of like, oh, whoa, this is like a different style for them even. It sounds like something, it was really fun to hear that. But I think How I Met Your Mother was my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely thought about that for a long time too, or like whenever we're releasing music, things would sound so different. And for a long time, I worried about it. Like, how could we do this and then put that out? And then I feel like if you listen to the first album, the whole thing is kind of like all over the place in terms of sound and somehow connects. At a certain point, I just stopped thinking about it. I was like, whatever, we can't really control what we're writing, so let's just do it.
I like it. Pure creativity. Were there any other artists that inspired you in either the creation of the first album or in the newest stuff you've been making?
You know who I
Influences.
hear a lot in some of the newer stuff we've been doing has been King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Yeah.
In terms of like, for all the wrong reasons, has those like just the tempo changes, and some of the newer stuff we've been writing they write in this like very like kind of like open tunes, like bluesy guitar. I've definitely heard that in some of the heavier stuff we were doing.
It's just not a lot of like 9/8, 7/8.
No, we don't do any of that.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
That's what. Yeah.
But I guess I think Radiohead will go for me and him at least. I don't know if you listen to him that
The
much.
Clash.
Father John Misty. We all love his songwriting.
I think as a band, what initially united us was Radiohead, and that was like for me one of like my oldest and deepest loves, because I discovered them when you really identify with a band, like in high school.
Yeah.
Like now I listen to new artists and I'll like them, but it's not. I don't build a person around them. And back then it was like I was Radiohead, and then I met these guys who also like kind of felt the same.
It's pretty much the same.
I am.
What's your favorite Radiohead album? Are you like in the electronic area or more of like the Benz type of stuff?
That's a crazy question.
That is a good
I'm
question.
going Amnesiac. I
I kind of like the Benz and Rainbows. Are mine too.
I'd say
Oh,
OK
and
Computer.
Rainbows.
I mean, how can you deny the classic?
I mean, they're amazing. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. What about you?
I think I fall where Teddy falls. I think I'm more of like a Ben's in Rainbows type of guy. But I love Amnesiac. I've been reading the Kid A book. It's not like a Kid A book, it's like Kid A in the context of Radiohead as a whole, but it like centers on like the impact of Kid A. And they were talking about how Amnesiac is kind of like the B side of Kid A. And I like honestly like I see how that is accurate, but I personally love Amnesiac a lot more than Kid A, especially I mean like Kid A is like really cool and stuff like that. You'll never really catch me listening to like Kid A though.
Oh, man. I listen to it.
I've always wondered because I think Amnesiac holds up just as strongly. Like the songs are really good, and then sometimes the way people talk about it, it seems almost like a marketing thing. Like Radiohead did a lot of stuff, and then they knew Kid A was going to be great, so they put that out. And some people act like Amnesiac is just like, you know, they market it as like a sister session, like this is not our throwaways, this is a new album. And some people are like, no, this is just B-sides that they marketed to sell. But like, no, the shit they were doing on Amnesiac is so different. Like Life in a Glass House. They have the whole like New Orleans, like dirge, like jazz band. That's not something you would have put on like Kid A. Like I think they were doing way different stuff there.
Yeah. I think that the free jazz, well, I guess for Life in a Glass House, the way that I kind of think about it is like in comparison with maybe like How to Disappear Completely.
How so?
I mostly just like the tonality and the atmosphere of it. I think that what they build with like their subtle just like background noise. I mean, like obviously Tom's hum is a lot more distinct on I guess Life in a Glass House, depending on how you find distinct for his voice. But yeah.
So how do you feel about like Pablo Honey? What were you gonna say about that?
Well, so Pablo Honey, you know, like I like Pablo Honey. I, you know, like I understand why it's seen as like this, you know, this like immature Radiohead album, obviously. But I think that, you know, like if you lived at that time and Radiohead hadn't come out with anything yet, and they came out with Pablo Honey, you would have been like, this is a good album, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, like, obviously, I mean, like, OK Computer is like a masterpiece of an album. You know, like all these other albums that followed were like incredible. But I think that, you know, like in a vacuum, Pablo Honey is just is a good album. It's not anything super great. It's, you know, singer-songwriter, you know, like it sounds like Tom York wrote it in high school, which, you know, like he kind of did for a lot of it. But
I mean, that's the cool thing. Like, there's cringy moments on it because it is this young band. But that's the cool thing about that era of Radiohead is because there are good cuts off that album, but then the progression of Radiohead is insane.
Incredible, yeah.
To see them go from Pablo Honey to Benz to OK Computer to Kid A is like a wild leap, and that's what's so cool about it. That's why you can't like diss on like Pablo Honey, because like they were starting out.
I cringe at like our last album from time to time too. I'm like, why did I sing that?
That's why I honestly compare Radiohead's discography in a lot of ways to like the Beatles' discography. You know, like you can look at like Please Please Me and be like, oh, like, you know, it's just like teeny bop type of like stuff.
Yeah.
And then you go from like their, you know, from like 63 to like 66, and it's like just such a different band.
Yeah.
And I feel like those two bands they're very similar in that way, unlike many, and I'd say really in a lot of ways any other band.
I would agree.
And that openness and experimentation, though, I think is what's so key. Like Radiohead does that so intensely, and obviously the Beatles did as well, was like that constant just being open to new sounds and just like really just searching for the next thing and like just always trying to grow, I feel like, as opposed to just like capturing a sound and then being like, this is us and going. That's why I like to hear the way that you guys are thinking about it too, because I think it's really like refreshing to hear kind of we just make music that we think sounds good, and we keep making music and we keep performing music. We're not really like thinking about it. We're just kind of doing it based on what we think sounds good and how we sound together. I like that a lot because I think that that's really nice as opposed to sometimes going at it from a much more direct approach. Although you see a lot of that as well these days too, obviously. you can experiment with genres all you want. You know, we're also lucky enough to live in a day and age where you can listen to as much music as you want. You can hop on like Spotify or YouTube or anywhere, you know, Apple Music, wherever, and just have access to everything. So we all grew up listening to so much different stuff, and then it starts showing in the music.
That's the thing. Like the idea of genre is kind of antiquated because I mean that's not how like what we grew up with. Like you said, we grew up with the internet. Back then, bands used to stick in a box because like you would go and have to buy a CD or a record, and that's all you could hear. And I think that's why so many artists now don't do that, is because like it literally is not how our brains work. It's not how we listen to music. You guys are probably the same way, like where you know, commuting or whatever, just listening to music on the computer, you shuffle and you have like so many different genres coming out.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just, and like, I guess the way that music is released now online, it doesn't have to be in one genre at all.
And along the same vein, it's music is used for a lot more different purposes now too. And I think that's what also shows in the way that music is made. I mean, not only in just the vibes that you have, like, oh, I want to party, or oh, I want to work out, or oh, I want to chill. It's also oh, I'm on TikTok and I need something that I want to dance to, or there's got to be virality to it, or oh, I'm on, you know, I want heavy beat because I'm on Instagram or something else. Like it's music always molds to the mediums as well, which is kind of fun. Like in the same way that you'd make music that's for live, you know, like this is what we want to make music to perform live, or you want to make music to do something else. There's that on top of the fact that we have access to all different genres that are influencing the writing of music anyway. And then now we have so many different mediums that they're coming out on. So it's all those things come together. So I think you're right. I mean, there've been a lot of talk about like post-genre, you know, world.
Yeah. I mean, the environment influences it so much. Like the environment in which
genre, I like that.
But the environment in which you listen to it and the environment in which you create it influences it so much. I mean, literally, like if you think of like church music, like cathedrals, they're built for music. They're cavernous, and the sound is supposed to echo and like blend, and all those harmonies are written for that purpose. You know, you wouldn't play punk in there because the sound would just be all over the place. Punk was meant for these small rooms that it was played in.
Yeah, we're in a post-genre band. Post-punk, but not really. It's just post-genre.
We just play what we want.
Post-band.
Post-band. Post-genre, band. Nice. So where are you guys headed? What's next for you? I know you guys have alluded to, you know, there's a bunch of new music that you're sitting on that you'll put out, and that 2021, you know, you'll be doing a lot. But what's, you know, where are you headed? What's next?
Big year ahead of us.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do
singles.
Oh yeah, singles.
Well,
Well, I mean,
singles.
I guess I feel like Daniel X set it up, so you gotta like release more music in order for the algorithm and his platform to work in your favor. I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't have any power to not play the game. So I guess we're going to release some of these different sounds we've been making during quarantine, and some of the harder blues rock stuff that we recorded before it as a band together with honestly a past member at this point already. But yeah, I think we're going to release that Strong Blues album. I'm calling it a blues album. I guess that's what it is.
So we have this album called Leonardo Montel, which I think we're going to release first. And that is going to be like the For All the Wrong Reasons kind of sound. And the idea with it was, I mean, it's not a concept album by any means, but like kind of like an eclectic assortment of like these Americana like rock tracks, and like I don't know, each one having a different flavor, but all being along that kind of that roadside motel feel. And it slaps. Yeah, the shit slaps.
It slaps.
It was meant to be like a party album, like our kind of party, which is just like loud guitars and that shit. But
yeah, so the next several months we're just gonna release singles, like a single a month, I think, and it's gonna be different sounds. We're gonna maybe do some of the softer stuff. Our next single is going to be a little soft. It's going to come out in January. Maybe the next one after that's going to be a little soft. I mean, we're all sitting around not doing anything. We can't go out. If this vaccine works and everybody can eventually start meeting each other face to face, then maybe we can excite them with this rock music come summertime.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to stay optimistic, but
then, I mean, it's interesting because you guys heard I Want to Get High, and that was definitely a different direction. And we have, so our other batch of songs were written more along the same time we wrote that. And so it's not like they all sound like that, but I think because we wrote them closer together, they fit better together. And so that's going to be different than We Are in a Motel kind of completely. And that will come out sometime after. Like you heard Suicide Watch, a bit of that. That's kind of in that vein.
Did you Suicide Watch?
He heard like the rooftop session.
Oh, but he didn't hear the studio.
No, the studio slaps.
so we'll put it out in the spring just to do a single a month. I don't know.
Oh man, yeah.
But I mean, obviously we'd love to play live again too, but you can't really even count on that at this point. So who knows?
Have you guys been getting like a lot of like live stream type of stuff? Like, have you considered doing like Zoom concerts or, like all that stuff?
We could.
We totally could, but if I'm being totally honest, I've thought about this, and I mean, we don't really even have a big fan base right now. I mean, I'm sure they'd love to see it, but I can't help but think like it's gonna be sort of no time, and when we get to go play on stages again, suddenly you're gonna realize, wow, that all of that just happened. That was a year and a half, and now it's back to normal. Well, not normal, the new normal, the new abnormal. But yeah, I don't know. I just want to work on like studio work. Just put our energy to making music with our engineer who we love, Jeremy
Lucas.
Nominated this year for a Grammy.
He's a god. He's our
father.
Four Grammys.
He's a beast.
Yeah.
Jeremy Lucas, look him up. Give him some love.
He's won a couple before. He's awesome.
He's our Nigel, if we're talking Radiohead.
Yeah,
When you guys were talking about that, like roadside motel thing, I was actually thinking, like, you guys ever think about, and like in reference, like our conversation about like the album versus singles conversation, you guys ever thought about like concept albums and like how it might or might not be like a dying art?
Oh yeah, this is. I'm just gonna say this is right up my alley right now, man.
Let's hear it.
Speak on it.
How do you guys feel about Frank Zappa, Mothers of Invention?
I think Frank Zappa is like super cool. Like I can't personally like get myself attached to it, aside from like a couple of songs, but he's awesome.
If you listen to Freak Out, it's the Mothers of Invention, 1966.
Mm-hmm.
That's a concept album, right? And that's like one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life. I think concept albums are amazing because I think making music and a big part of it is making kind of like to me at least, it's like a big album with a story behind it and like a whole message, and each track is kind of like a step to that, like a message inside of it. And I think concept albums are sweet, man.
I always wondered, like, I would love to make a concept album because that's what I grew up loving, like Pink Floyd. Mm-hmm. These guys, like the sound of like concept album, I was like interested in it. Like, what are these guys writing about? Personally, I don't know if I could write one right now because like to sustain interest in one subject, one album, I'm kind of like a song to song guy. Like I'll switch it up, but like it is amazing to have that clarity of thought beforehand. To, like I want to write an album like this, and then to go into it and like flesh out each song.
Execute that. Yeah.
I wonder, do you think it's a dying concept?
I think that, well, like I said, like it might or might not be because, like it could be a way in which it could be the way in which albums are created now, like there could like, like if someone wants to make a concept album, it could be like as a whole listening experience, kind of like watching a movie or something. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like if you want to like really understand it, you have to listen to the whole album. You can't just like pick, like the singles or whatever from it because, they wouldn't make sense by themselves. So that was what I was thinking could be a way in which, like whole album listening kind of comes back. Because
It's almost, I
yeah.
mean, the way things are released, it does make it harder to have a concept record.
Well, that's why it feels like to me that you either have to have a concept record or just you're making pretty much singles effectively. Because like that's the way that we take in music now, where it's either like you're intentionally putting out a whole album and people need to listen to it. Like it's almost like art versus function, where like the singles is like plays the game. It's the way that people ingest music most normally now. So you can do part of that, or you have to do part of that, especially when you're up and coming. But you can do concept albums, but it almost feels like if you're gonna do an album, and you want it to be thought of as a whole album, which you don't need to think about it that way anymore. Your audience doesn't even necessarily need to do it, but if you need them to, it probably needs some sort of concept to it in order for people to think of it as an album as a whole. Whereas in the past, people would think about bands in terms of albums. People think about bands in terms of songs now. So that's like the major key difference, I think. I mean, but you could still, I think, make albums for concept, but it just, it's gonna have to have a different purpose to it, unless you were to do it the other way around. So
I think there are ways to release it that people don't grasp. Like Gorillaz does a good job, and they always have. Like the way they release Song Machine, I actually didn't like the way they released it because there's a lot of content, but like still they were like doing definitely. I don't know if you guys heard the Song Machine releases, but like there would be like interviews from the bands and like all that kind of shit. Like not so much concept, but that was definitely, they tried to turn Spotify into more of an experience, more of like not just you're listening to the new Gorillaz song, but you put on this new episode of the Song Machine and see what comes out. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I think that like like the idea of listening to a whole album might just change. And they might, they might or might not just kind of redefine what a concept album is, and how, like it might not just be one idea, but it might be one listening experience, where instead of focusing on one thing, it might just be like, like kind of like Song Machine, like how you described is like, like you tune into like each episode in a way.
Yeah. I wonder, do you guys think it's anything on the listener that the listener doesn't want a concept album?
I mean, I guess it depends on the listener, like for me personally, if, like someone put out a concept album and it was a band that I at least, kind of liked, I would definitely listen to it. Like if someone was like, this is a concept album, like it's this, I would definitely listen from track 1 to, track 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it depends on whether or not the artist has won over their audience yet. Because like the thing is, a lot of artists, especially when they're young, have to rely on like playlisting and things like that, which means that your album is irrelevant, essentially. But what it becomes very relevant and very interesting when people buy into you. Like then they're going to go listen to your whole album. Then you can actually put out concept albums. And and in fact, that's why I actually really like when bands put out concept albums too, because then maybe they're going to have to still put out singles, or at least their album's going to have to be able to work on a singular song level to hook me in so that I learn about them. But then once I get interested in them, I love that I have an album to go to or a series of albums to go to, because for me, it shows the story that they're telling and it lets me get a fuller sense of who the band is and what they're experimenting with, which I really, really like. But I think it depends on, where you are with your fans and what they expect you. Because I think a lot of the biggest artists today still release albums because they can, right? They can wait a year and release an album and people will listen. People will wait for Kanye West to drop an album. People will wait for Eminem to drop an album. People will wait for Taylor Swift to drop an album. She drops 2, it's crazy, And so that kind of thing you can do. But when you're newer, I think that you need to like at least be able to put out singles or at least have your songs be thought of in form of singles, whether it's alone or in addition to being an album as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that trust is crazy. Like the amount of trust that you have to have an artist that you like to like continue listening to them, and it's a weird thing to develop. I definitely have that with bands that I like. I started to like trust at some point, like, all right, they're gonna go on this other like path, but I know I have enough faith in them that like I'll follow it and see where it goes.
Something that's interesting about that is so I was going into my senior year of high school when Tame Impala released Currents. And before Currents, I had, like known like a couple of songs, obviously like Feels Like We Only Go Backwards and Elephant, and like a couple of other singles from those albums. But when I bought Currents on vinyl, and I listened to it all the way through, and I have to say, listening to Currents as what I think, I'm not sure if it's defined as a concept album. I define it as a concept album personally. When I listened to that song from front to back, from that album from front to back, I fell in love with Tame Impala. That was like, so that really actually introduced me to Tame Impala, to go back to Inner Speaker and really look at their deep tracks, and then like the earlier stuff, even from like 2009 that they were releasing. So like in that way, honestly, if you can impress someone with a concept album, or even just as a like a whole album, just like as a collective piece, I think that that is also kind of the way to define yourself as an artist in a lot of ways.
Well, Leonardo Moto's kind
Yeah.
of like a concept album,
I,
in a sense.
The way I'm seeing is that like almost all of my favorite albums are concept albums.
Yeah, man.
If Currents is a concept album, then
Graduation
is a concept album. It's a painting, it's a canvas that the artist wanted to paint at that moment in time in their lives.
And I think that it's because if you love the artist, it's going to all be there. Because another thing is like, if you are an artist that only puts out singles, then you have the other problem, which is your audience always wants more and more music from you as well. So you have to keep putting out singles. And in a way, it's harder, I feel like, to just put out only singles, right? Because it's like just less there. People now use it kind of as a hook, like to an album, or as like a teaser to an album, or they'll just use it because they don't like they're an individual person and they're not a band or something, and they don't want to put out as many albums, full albums. I mean, there's many different ways you could do it, but yeah, I think you're right though. If you love a band, the album is going to be something that you love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, from a monetary perspective, I think that the game of music is always changing. Like now it's kind of focused on making singles and like whatever. But I think that like at the heart of music, I don't think it's really ever changed in terms of like really like what defines good music. And I mean, like that's kind of why I started my like music page. Like you got, because like there is like this like good music that no matter what time you're in, like that doesn't change. Like there is the game that you have to play to try to make money as an artist and stuff like that, and there you kind of have to adjust to whatever era you're in. But I think that at like its core, music is still music. I mean, like to put it as cliche as possible, to try to make sense of it, that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, well, that's when it gets down to releasing a strategic single to hook the people in that might not listen. Like The Cure, like releasing all their singles are like the happiest shit ever. And then you listen to Cure and it's like really sad, but that's how they got like people to like we said, trust them.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of makes me think. I read something about Frank Zappa just making the music he wanted to make.
Yeah.
Not necessarily breaking the bank on everything he does.
No,
He's just the guy that has to do this.
Yeah, it's
just life.
Yeah.
I kind of look at Frank Zappa similarly to like King Gizzard, honestly. I know that you guys mentioned him before. Just kind of like this guy that just puts out music just like because he fucking wants to. Like,
and it was so different. It's so distinct.
Yeah.
It's all different within it. So yeah, he plays jazz, he plays fusion, he plays fucking pop, like whatever comes to mind, whatever comes through.
I've always loved artists like that. Like Bowie for me is a big artist like that, where it's not like an artist. I mean, I love like the Stones, but the Stones you associate with the Rolling Stones, and someone like Bowie is almost like he's a persona. He like steps into whatever genre. There's like a degree of separation between the guy making the songs and Bowie, where he's like he can put Bowie in these different like outfits and make different things. I've always been really interested in that.
Yeah, vessel for music.
Yeah,
that's what it is.